She had saved 2 Apache girls, and by sunrise their father showed up with something that felt less like gratitude and more like a warning wrapped in a gift. Clara Harkin had fought off a pack of wolves to pull 2 lost children out of death's jaws. She bled for them. She lived through it. And she honestly believed the ordeal ended there. But when their father arrived at first light, he didn't thank her. And in that strange, breathless moment, Clara's quiet drift toward a lonely end twisted into something she never imagined. A life she never chose, one she wouldn't be able to outrun. Before we ride into this tale, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and whether you've ever been rescued by something that looked like a blessing but felt more like fate stepping in. High in the wild ridges of the New Mexico Territory in 1874, a grieving widow was about to learn that sometimes rescue goes both ways, and the most dangerous thank you is the kind that doesn't let you refuse it. 6 months after burying her husband, Jed Flint, killed when his horse panicked under him, Clara Harkin vanished into the mountains. She'd walked away from the house in town, from pitying neighbors, from endless talk about how time heals all wounds. Time hadn't healed a thing. It had only made the emptiness familiar. With the last of her savings, Clara rented a small cabin 5 miles from anyone. She lived out her days with books, memories, and a silence thick enough to choke on. Most mornings she barely remembered why she bothered to rise from bed. And then the screaming shattered everything. Late afternoon sunlight washed the mountains in gold when Clara, arms full of firewood, heard it. A high, panicked cry, unmistakably a child in danger. Without thinking, heart hammering, she ran. Through the pines she spotted them. 2 girls, maybe 6 and 8, pressed against a slab of rock. Their clothes were torn, faces streaked with dirt and tears, and circling them, pacing with hungry confidence, were 5 gray wolves. Apache children, Clara realized from their dress and the way their dark hair was braided. They must have wandered far from their people. Now they were seconds from dying. Clara had 3 choices. Run back to her cabin and pretend she heard nothing. Try to scare off the wolves and probably die. Or stand there and watch 2 children get torn apart. Her hands shook as she grabbed a thick branch and thrust it into the small cooking fire she'd lit earlier. Flames caught. The end blazed. "Hey!" she shouted, sprinting through the trees, swinging the burning branch high. "Get away from them!" The wolves hesitated, startled. Clara drove the fire at the closest one. It yelped and pulled back, but the rest circled wider, trying to slip around her. She shoved herself between the wolves and the girls, waving her torch desperately. Her pulse thundered. She was going to die. But if she was going to die anyway, alone, swallowed by grief, this at least would matter. "Stay behind me!" she yelled, unsure if they understood a word. The alpha lunged first. Clara swung hard, but the wolf was quicker. Its teeth clamped around her forearm, ripping skin and fabric. She screamed but didn't drop the fire. With her free hand, she snatched up a rock and slammed it against the wolf's skull. Once, twice. The beast yelped and released her. Blood streamed down her arm. "Go!" Clara bellowed at the pack, thrashing the fire wildly. "Go!" Maybe it was the flames. Maybe it was the wild determination of a woman with nothing left to lose. Or maybe the wolves simply decided these prey weren't worth the trouble. Whatever the reason, they retreated, melting back into the trees. Clara stayed upright only long enough to be sure they were gone. Then her legs buckled. She crashed to her knees, the burning branch falling from her hand. Small hands touched her shoulders. The 2 girls stared at her, wide, dark eyes full of fear, shock, and something close to reverence. It's okay, Clara whispered, though she doubted they understood. You're safe now. The older girl murmured something in Apache, her voice trembling. She gently inspected Clara's wounded arm with surprising calm for a child. Clara stared at the sliced flesh, strangely distant from the pain. She had fought wolves and lived. And for the first time in half a year, she felt something besides numbness. Come on, she said softly. Let's get you warm. She led them to her cabin, her arm throbbing with every step. Inside, she lit lamps, stoked the fire, and wrapped her wound. The girls huddled on her bed, exhausted, filthy, clearly starving. Clara washed them, fed them bread and dried meat, watched them eat like they hadn't touched food in days. The older girl pointed at herself. Tala, then at the smaller one. Naya. Clara repeated their names, then pointed at herself. Clara. Tala nodded solemnly and spoke in a fast string of Apache. Clara wished she could understand. Were they describing where they'd come from? Whether someone was searching for them? Family? Clara asked gently. Home? She gestured towards the mountains. Tala pointed that way, though fear tightened her expression. She said something urgent, then pressed Clara's hand to her own chest, a gesture so pure it stung Clara's eyes. You're welcome, Clara whispered. You're safe here, I promise. That night, by the fire, the girls curled together on her bed and slept, as if they'd been running from nightmares for days. Clara watched them breathe and felt something she thought was dead inside her flicker back to life. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to return them to their people. She had no idea that, out in the dark timber, a warrior was tracking his missing daughters, had been hunting for them 2 days straight, driven by terror and love, following signs only Apache eyes could read. And she certainly didn't know that when he found those girls alive in a white woman's cabin, he'd make a choice that would tie their lives together in ways none of them could escape. But that was tomorrow's trouble. Tonight, Clara sat by the fire, her wounded arm screaming in pain, and felt grateful for the first time in months to have a reason to stay awake. Dawn rose cold and sharp. Clara woke to find both girls already sitting upright, quiet as shadows by the cabin window, their eyes locked on the tree line like sentries on watch. Something, or someone, was coming. She moved around the room slowly, arm aching, and fixed a simple breakfast of warm porridge with honey. They ate quickly, gratefully, but their gazes kept drifting back to the woods. Tala, the older one, kept whispering the same word over and over. Your father? Clara guessed, watching her gestures. Tala nodded quickly, her expression a mix of relief and dread. Then she pointed at Clara and made a motion across her chest. Protective. Urgent. It felt like she was saying, he won't hurt you. Not after what you did. Clara hoped that was true. She'd heard stories about Apache warriors, some told with sympathy, others laced with fear. She didn't know which kind of man was coming. She only knew this. He'd find his daughters in a white woman's home. And history didn't often treat that kindly. An hour later, Clara was unwrapping the bandage on her wounded arm when Tala froze, eyes gone wide. She said something sharp to Naya, and both girls darted for the door. Clara stepped closer to the window, her breath catching. A man was striding out of the forest. A warrior, no question about it. He was tall and broad-shouldered, moving like he barely held himself in check. Buckskin pants, moccasins that made no sound, a beaded shirt that shimmered in the sun. His long black hair was tied back, and his face was carved from storm and fire. A scar cut from brow to cheek, and in his eyes burned something fierce and unreadable. Hey, 8! the girls cried, sprinting to him. His whole being cracked, the hardness shattered as he dropped to his knees, gathering them into his arms like they were the only thing holding him upright. He clutched them tight, trembling. He spoke in fast, broken bursts of Apache, his voice breaking with raw emotion. The girls answered quickly, pointing back at the cabin, at Clara. The man rose slowly, placing a hand on each of his daughter's shoulders. He walked toward Clara with a calm that felt dangerous. She stood her ground. Didn't step back, didn't let him see the pounding in her chest. Up close, he was even more intimidating. 30-something. Strong jaw, hollow cheeks. That long scar like a blade had marked him once. But it was his eyes, those sharp, knowing eyes, that made her feel like he could see every broken piece inside her. He studied her, lingering on the makeshift bandage, the exhaustion etched into her face. He noticed, too, how she positioned herself between him and the door, as if still guarding his girls. Then he did something she didn't expect. He brought a closed fist to his chest and bowed his head. "You save," he said, his English thick but careful. "My daughters, you fight, you bleed." "Yes, the wolves," Clara answered, faltering. "They were—" She stopped. He understood more than he let on. "I couldn't leave them." "You could," he replied gently. "You choose not to. This—" He paused, searching. "Is sacred." He reached for a necklace she hadn't noticed, a strand of turquoise carved into sacred shapes, strung with sinew and silver. "This was my wife's," he said, his voice thick. "She died 3 winters ago, after birth of small one." He nodded to Naya, who clung tightly to his leg. "I keep," he added, "to remember, to honor." He stepped closer. Before Clara could object, he raised the necklace and slipped it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin. A strange heat passed through her. "You mother now?" he said. His eyes didn't blink. "You saved. You bled. You earn—" Her thoughts scattered. "Wait, what? No, I'm not. I can't be—" He raised a hand gently. "Among my people, one who saves life with own blood. This makes sacred bond. You are mother now, to them. This is truth." "I wasn't trying to," she stammered. "I only helped. That doesn't make me their mother." "Yes," he said again, softly. "It does." Tala spoke up then, pointing to Clara's arm. The warrior nodded in understanding. "She says, 'Wolves bit you. You fought, even hurt. You protected with own body, like mother, like my wife.'" His jaw tensed. "What I could not do, because I wasn't there." And Clara understood. This man, Sani, she guessed, had been wandering the wilderness, blaming himself. Now he was handing that grief, that redemption to her. "I'm honored," she said slowly, "but I'm not Apache. I don't know your ways. I can't just become their mother." "You will learn," he said. "I teach. You come to our village. You live. You be mother." Her voice cracked. "You're serious? You want me to leave my home and follow you because I saved them?" "Yes." Simple. Certain. No room for doubt. "What's your name?" she asked. He seemed surprised she didn't already know. "Sani." "Sani." She nodded slowly. "I respect what this means to you, but I have a life." She stopped. That word tasted hollow. Life? What life? Sani saw it too. "You have husband? Family waiting?" "No," Clara whispered. "He died 6 months ago." A flicker of kinship passed between them. "Then we both lost," Sani said. "You help me. I help you. You need reason to live. I see this. In your eyes." She bit back tears. How dare he see that? How dare he speak the truth she'd been running from? I can't just leave everything behind. You already did, he said. You live alone, in cabin, hiding from pain. Come with us. Be mother to Tala and Naya. Let yourself live again. And if I say no? Sani's face hardened. Then you tell my daughters their lives are not worth your time, that you saved them, as charity, something to forget. That's not fair. Life is not fair, he cut in. My wife died giving life. Your husband died by chance. My daughters nearly died to wolves. You nearly died saving them. None of this fair, but we choose what we do with it. He stepped closer, voice low. I choose to honor you, give you place in my family. You choose to accept or not, but know this. They already love you. Tala told me you sang to them. Naya said you held her when she cried. His voice thickened. You are mother in their hearts. Refusing now will break them. Clara looked at the two girls clinging close to their father but watching her, eyes full of something fragile. Hope. Then Tala reached out and took Clara's hand, squeezing it tight. The necklace around Clara's neck felt heavier than gold, heavier than grief. It felt like both, a chain and a crown, and she wasn't sure which it truly was. I don't speak your language, Clara said softly, voice unsteady. I don't know your customs. I'll make mistakes. We all make mistakes, Sani replied. But you will learn. My daughters will teach. I will teach. But you must choose now. He gestured to the lonely cabin, the wilderness that stretched beyond it. Stay here, he said. Die slowly, or come with us. His voice was blunt, almost cruel, but Clara knew it was the truth. She had been dying slowly, one hollow day after another, and the only thing that had stirred her heart was standing right in front of her, eyes wide with belief she didn't think she deserved. What happens if I refuse this? She wondered. If she turned her back on this strange, painful flicker of purpose and returned to the dull numbness. If I come, she asked slowly, and it doesn't work, if I can't adapt, then what? Then you leave, Sani said simply. I won't make you stay, but you must try. For them, he looked to his daughters, to Tala and Naya, their little hands so still, waiting. Clara glanced down at her own arm, still wrapped in bandages from where the wolf's teeth had torn her. She'd bled for them, without hesitation. How long do I have to decide? She asked. Now, Sani said. We leave now. Village is 2 days' walk. Take what you need. Leave the rest. That's not much time. Time is a lie white people tell themselves to avoid hard choices, Sani said. In your heart, you already decided. I saw it. You're just afraid to say yes. He was right, and she hated that he was. The moment he had placed that necklace around her neck and called her mother, something in Clara had stirred. Not fear, not confusion. Recognition. Like a soul remembering the path it was meant to walk. Okay, she said, the word trembling from her lips. I'll come. I'll try. Sani gave a small nod, like he'd known all along she would. Tala and Naya burst into joyful chatter. Naya threw her arms around Clara's waist, hugging her with such trust it made Clara's eyes fill with sudden, stinging tears. Pack, Sani said. 1 hour. Only what you can carry. Clara moved through the cabin slowly, selecting what little she would bring. The rest she left behind. Her old life, her old grief, her old silence. In the mirror above the bed, she caught her reflection. Same woman, same face. But the necklace glowed at her throat, glinting with turquoise fire. And just like that, Clara Harkin had agreed to become someone entirely different. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that back in the village, someone had been waiting 3 years for the role she had just accepted. And that person wouldn't see her arrival as a gift. They'd see it as theft, and they'd want it back. The journey to the village took 2 long days, just as Sani said it would. Clara walked behind him, one hand clasping Tala's, while Naya skipped ahead, already laughing again the way children somehow could. Sani didn't speak much. He moved like a man made from the forest itself. Quiet, watchful, precise. Every few steps he'd pause, scan the horizon, scent the air. He was always aware. Clara tried to keep pace, though her arm throbbed and her legs grew heavy before nightfall. That evening, they camped beneath the stars. Tala nestled beside Clara and with the patience of a born teacher began offering words in Apache. "Ai," she said, touching her father. "Father." "Shima," she pointed to Clara's heart. "Mother." "Shidi," she said, tapping her sister. "Sister." The words were soft, round, hard to say. Clara stumbled, but Tala smiled each time and repeated them with shining eyes. Across the fire, Sani sat in silence, face unreadable. Once their eyes met. Clara saw something flicker behind the stillness. Grief, maybe. Or guilt. She wondered if he was thinking about the woman he had loved, the one whose necklace now rested on Clara's chest. Later, once the girls were asleep, Clara spoke into the quiet night. "Your wife," she said. "What was her name?" Sani sat still for a long time. Just when she thought he wouldn't answer, he said, "Eha. It means hawk singing while it flies." Her voice was always singing, even when her heart was tired. Now the house is too quiet. Girls need woman's voice, woman's songs. "I'm not her," Clara whispered. "I can't replace her." "No one replaces," Sani said firmly. "You don't wear her face, you wear her necklace. Different thing." He stared into the fire. "The necklace says, 'This person is sacred to my family.' Not, 'This person is my dead wife.'" Clara swallowed hard. She understood. But it didn't make the weight around her neck any lighter. By the second morning, they crested a ridge and looked down into a quiet valley. Maybe 20 dwellings clustered beside a narrow stream, smoke curling from fires, children running, dogs barking in the sun. "Home," Sani said simply. As they descended the slope, the quiet hum of daily life cracked. Someone shouted. People turned. Faces lit up. Ka and Naya had been found. Warriors and women rushed to them, speaking quickly in Apache, pressing hands to the girls' arms and faces, making sure they were real, alive. An older woman, hair streaked silver and skin carved like canyon rock, grabbed Sani's arm, speaking fast. He responded, pointing toward Clara. The woman turned. Her eyes found the turquoise necklace around Clara's throat. Her lips parted. All conversation around them stopped. Dozens of eyes turned to Clara, the white woman, wearing Eha's necklace. Then someone shoved through the crowd. A younger woman, maybe 28, tall, beautiful in a hard, unyielding way. Her hair was long and dark, her eyes burning. When she saw Clara, saw the necklace, her face turned ghost white, then red with fury. She shouted at Sani, voice rising word by word. He answered calmly, but she wasn't soothed. She pointed wildly at Clara, the necklace, the girls. Then she spat at Clara's feet and stormed off. The crowd murmured, uneasy. "That was Asha," Sani said quietly. "Sister of Eha. She's been caring for the girls since my wife passed. She is angry." "I gathered," Clara said, stomach twisting. "What did she say?" that you have no right to the necklace, that I dishonor Aha's memory, that a white woman cannot be mother to Apache girls." His jaw tightened. "She is angry because she believed something I never promised, that I would marry her, that she would become mother to my daughters." Clara's chest sank. She had walked into something far more complicated than she'd realized. Asha hadn't just lost her role, she'd lost her future. The older woman approached again. This time she spoke in halting English. "I am Suna, elder. Speak for women." She reached out and touched the necklace softly. "This is great honor Sani gives you, but great burden too. You understand?" "I'm trying to," Clara answered honestly. "Good." Suna nodded. "You stay with me tonight. Learn our ways. Tomorrow you begin, as Shima." Her eyes were kind but sharp. "Why you do this? Why leave your people for ours?" Clara looked at Tala and Naya, who stood beside Sani but watched her with wide, waiting eyes. "Because I saved them," Clara said softly. "And in doing that, they saved me too." Suna nodded slowly. "Good answer. Come. I teach you many things." That night in the village was a flood of sounds, smells, and unfamiliar faces. Suna's home smelled of sage and burning wood. She taught Clara how to sit properly, how to speak with elders, how to show respect in small ways that mattered. Other women came and stared, some curious, some cold, most unsure. They all saw the same thing: the white woman wearing Aha's necklace, and in the shadows beyond them, Asha watched and waited. Some eyes were curious, others cold and sharp, and many watched Clara like a threat that had been let in the gate. "Mora tells everyone you're dangerous," Suna said bluntly, "that you've bewitched Sani, that you stole what was meant to be hers." "I didn't steal anything," Clara replied, the heat rising in her chest. "Sani made that decision. I never asked for it." "I know." Suna's voice softened. "You have honest eyes. But Mora—" She shook her head slowly. She loved her sister deeply. Aha's death shattered something inside her. She poured all that love into Tala and Naya, became their second mother. And now she sees you not as help, but as a thief, a stranger who stole her babies. "I don't want to take anything from her," Clara said. "Maybe we could share the role? She could still—" "No," Suna cut in, her tone firm as stone. "Sani gave you the necklace. That made you Shima. This is not something that can be divided. You are their mother now, or you are not. There is no halfway." Clara barely slept that night, her thoughts like thunder behind her eyes. She had walked away from everything familiar and into a life she didn't understand, taken on a role she wasn't sure she could bear, and in doing so, made an enemy out of a woman who had once loved the same girls she now held. At dawn, Tala and Naya came to fetch her, their faces bright with excitement. They took her to the home that was now theirs. It was simple, well kept, and full of Mora's hands. Cooking tools, soft furs, small wooden toys. A life that had existed before Clara, a life she now stepped into. Sani was already inside, sorting supplies. "This was my wife's place," he said without looking at her. "Now it is yours. You care for them here. Teach, cook, be their mother." He paused. "I'll sleep in the warrior's lodge. Give you space." "You're not going to—" "We're not," Clara stammered. "I did not bring you here to be my wife," Sani said, finally meeting her gaze. "I brought you to be their mother. The necklace is about them, not us." Clara felt a strange blend of relief, and something else she didn't expect. Disappointment. "I understand." "Good." He started to leave, then stopped at the doorway. "Mora will stir trouble. Watch her." Don't leave the girls alone with her until... Until what? Sani didn't answer, just left in silence. The first week was both harder and easier than Clara expected. Tala and Naya took her in like sun takes to sky. They taught her words, routines, laughed at her mistakes. Other village children approached cautiously, then warmed when they saw Clara laughing, playing with the girls like she'd always belonged. Clara learned to cook their meals, sew with sinew, haul water without spilling. Her hands grew rough, her skin darker from the sun. She started understanding more of their language, even if the words still tangled on her tongue. But Mora never left her shadow. She was everywhere, watching, judging, whispering. She'd appear while Clara worked, saying things to other women in just enough volume to be heard, but not understood. She lavished attention on the girls when Clara was near. Gifts, smiles, soft words, as if reminding them who had held them first. The girls became confused, torn between history and blood, and the new bond their father had declared sacred. One evening, Naya tugged Clara's sleeve. "You stay?" she asked. "Or leave, like real Shima?" The question cracked something inside Clara. "I'm staying," she promised. "I'm not leaving you." But that night, Clara heard voices outside the home. Mora's, speaking in Apache. Low, dangerous. Clara couldn't catch most of it, but she heard enough. "White woman, not real mother. Leave soon." Clara stepped outside. "Mora," she said, "we need to talk." Mora turned, her eyes ablaze. "I have nothing to say to thieves." "I'm not a thief," Clara said, trying to steady her voice. "I didn't ask for this, but I'm here now, and I'm trying. I know you loved them first. You cared for them when they needed you. That doesn't vanish just because I'm here." We could nothing," Mora snapped. "You think you can wear my sister's necklace, sleep in her bed, hold her daughters, and I'll accept it? You think you can steal my family and I'll smile? I'm not trying to steal anything." "You already did." Mora stepped in, voice low and full of venom. "But maybe you won't keep it long." Clara's blood chilled. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm telling you the truth," Mora whispered. "This isn't your world. You don't belong here." She smiled then, cruel and slow, and soon everyone will see it. Then she walked away, leaving Clara frozen in the night air, her body shaking with fear and fury. Clara barely slept. Mora's words haunted her. What did she mean? What was she planning? 3 days later, Clara woke to silence. The furs beside her were empty. The girls were gone. Panic gripped her. She checked the corners, called their names, ran outside. Sani appeared in seconds, his face tight. "What is wrong?" "The girls," Clara gasped. "They're gone. They were here last night. I fell asleep, but now..." Others began to gather. The air turned electric with tension. Then Mora appeared, her face masked in concern. But to Clara, it looked like something practiced. Sani wasted no time. Warriors scattered. Women searched homes. Children were questioned. Hours passed. Nothing. Clara felt like she was shattering. She'd been trusted with their lives, and now she'd failed them. Afternoon burned toward dusk, when a young warrior returned, his face grim. He spoke fast to Sani in Apache, pointing toward the deep woods. Sani's expression hardened to stone. "They were seen going into the forest," he told Clara, "where the wolves hunt." "No," Clara whispered. "They wouldn't. They know better." "Unless someone told them to go there," Sani said, his eyes locking on Mora. "Told them their mother's spirit waits." The air cracked. The crowd gasped. Mora went pale. You did this, Sani said, his voice like thunder held in check. You sent them back into danger. I wanted them to see she's not fit, Mora shouted. She's not one of us. I should be the one raising them. They got lost before, Suna said sharply. Now again? How? You sent them, Clara said, the truth burning its way out. You sent them into the forest before, didn't you? When the wolves came. I didn't mean for wolves, Mora cried. I only wanted them lost. To make Sani see, make her look like a hero. It wasn't supposed to. But it did, Sani cut in. They nearly died, and she... He pointed to Clara. She saved them. The woman you hate saved them when your plan failed. I love those girls. Love doesn't send children into danger, Suna snapped. Love does not gamble lives on grief. But Clara wasn't listening anymore. She was already running, toward the trees, toward her daughters. Behind her, Sani barked orders, men scrambling to follow. But Clara didn't wait. She couldn't. This time, she'd get to them first. She ran through the forest like fire on the wind, lungs screaming, legs burning, wounded arm pounding with every jolt. But she didn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Behind her she could hear Sani and the others trying to catch up. But she had something they didn't, a mother's fear. This wasn't about obligation anymore. This was love. Somewhere between fighting off wolves, learning Apache words, and braiding 2 small heads of hair, Clara had become theirs. Tala, she screamed. Naya! Only silence. The trees swallowed sound. The light grew dim. Shadows stretched wide. This was the wolves' land. The place Mora had sent them. The place where one wrong step meant death. Clara didn't care. She'd tear the forest apart to bring them home. How could Mora have gone this far? Not once, but twice. What kind of love twisted itself so tight it was willing to gamble a child's life? Then Clara heard it. A scream, high, cracking with terror, ripped through the forest like steel scraping bone. She ran. Branches tore at her clothes and skin, roots clawed at her boots, but she didn't slow. She broke through a tangle of brush and stumbled into a small clearing, and froze at the sight that nearly stopped her heart. Tala and Naya were backed up against a wall of rock, nowhere left to run. 3 wolves, maybe the same pack as before, circled them with cold patience, hungry eyes never leaving the girls. Tala had her arms around Naya, trying to shield her tiny sister with her own body. Clara had no fire this time, no weapon, nothing but herself and a love fierce enough to meet death head-on. Hey! She shouted, charging straight at the wolves. Get away from my daughters! The wolves jerked toward her, thrown off by the sudden attack. Clara snatched up a fallen branch, not burning, just solid wood, and swung with all her strength. The blow cracked across one wolf's snout, sending it yelping back. But the other 2 fanned out, circling, flanking, waiting for an opening. Clara stepped between them and the girls, swinging wide arcs to keep them back. Run! She yelled. Go! Find your father! No! Tala cried, her voice fierce, shaking. We stay with you! One wolf lunged. Clara swung hard, too hard. The branch shattered in her hands. The wolf clamped onto her leg, teeth burying deep. Clara screamed, but she didn't fall. She grabbed a fist-sized rock and slammed it into the wolf's skull again and again until it released her. Blood poured down her leg, hot and fast. Clara staggered, gasping, but forced herself upright, planting her body over the girls who had moved behind her. The wolves circled again. They smelled weakness. This was the end. Clara knew it, if she died here. But Tala and Naya lived. There were worse ways to go. Then a war cry split the clearing. Sani burst in like a storm, a knife in one hand and a tomahawk in the other, moving with the deadly precision of a man who had survived a lifetime of battles. Before the closest wolf could react, Sani's blade cut its throat. The animal dropped instantly. The other two wolves turned and bolted into the trees. Sani let them go. He dropped to his knees beside Clara. "You are hurt," he said, breath tight. "The girls!" Clara gasped. "Are they?" "We are okay, Shima," Tala said behind her, voice shaking. Both girls threw themselves against Clara's back, sobbing into her shirt. Warriors poured into the clearing, spreading out to make sure the danger was gone. Sani inspected Clara's leg with practiced skill. "Deep wound," he said, "but you will heal." He lifted his eyes to hers. "You ran into the forest alone. No weapon. No help. Why?" Clara didn't hesitate. "Because they're my daughters. What else would I do?" Something shifted in Sani's expression. Not a full smile, but something close. "Yes," he said quietly. "You are Shima, the true one. Everyone will see now." He lifted Clara into his arms, careful with her leg. Tala and Naya pressed against her sides, refusing to let go the entire walk back. The journey blurred. Pain, exhaustion, fear draining into bone-deep relief. By the time they reached the village, Clara didn't remember closing her eyes. She woke hours later inside Eha's dwelling, wrapped in bandages smelling of herbs. Tala and Naya slept curled against her like small shadows. Across the room, Sani sat with his back to the wall, watching all three of them. When Clara stirred, he sat forward. "They wouldn't leave you," he said quietly. "I told them you would be fine, but they believed nothing except watching you breathe." Clara's throat closed. "Where's Mora?" "With the elders," Sani answered. "What she did, sending children into danger twice, this cannot be forgiven. She will be banished." "She said she did it for love," Clara whispered. "Love that harms is not love," Sani said, voice steady. "It is possession. It wears love's face, but it is something else entirely." He moved closer, sitting near her feet. "My wife would have hated what her sister became. Eha believed love meant freedom, not cages." "You loved her very much," Clara said softly. "Yes," Sani replied. "For 10 years she was my heart. When she died, I believed I would raise the girls half alive, never whole again." "And now?" Clara asked, afraid of his answer. Sani was quiet for a long moment. His eyes drifted to the sleeping girls. "Now," he said, "I watch a woman with no weapon run into a wolf pack for my daughters. I watch her bleed twice for them. I watch them call her Shima with love in their voices. And I think—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I think being whole again might be possible. For me, for you, for all of us." Clara's heart pounded. "Sani, I do not ask for an answer now," he said gently. "You came to be mother to my daughters. That is all I asked. But if one day, if you wished it, I would honor my wife by living again, loving again, choosing a woman who proved herself worthy of my daughter's love." "I'm not sure I'm ready," Clara whispered. "My husband has only been gone 6 months, and mine 3 years," Sani said softly. "Grief does not ask permission to stay, and it does not ask permission to leave. When it leaves, if it leaves, there may be room for something new." Before Clara could speak, Naya stirred, eyes opening. She saw Clara awake, and burst into tears, throwing her arms around Clara's neck. "You got hurt again," Naya sobbed in broken English. "Wolves bite you, saving us again." "I'm all right, sweet girl," Clara whispered. "I'm all right." Tala woke next. Soon both girls were crying, clinging to her, apologizing in a mix of Apache and English. Mora had told them their real mother's spirit was in the forest, that if they went alone, she would appear. In their longing, they believed her. "She is not your mother," Sani said firmly. "Your mother lives in memory, in our hearts, but she is gone." He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "This woman, she is your Shima now. She fought for you twice, chose you twice, and you are mine," Clara said, voice breaking. "For as long as you'll have me." "Forever," Tala said fiercely. "You are our Shima forever." That evening, the entire village gathered for Mora's judgment. The elders announced the sentence: banishment. Mora stood hollow-eyed, stripped of everything she grasped so tightly, the girls she claimed to love, the man she hoped to marry, her place in the tribe. She had lost it all. As warriors led Mora to the edge of the village, her eyes locked with Clara's. For a heartbeat, the hatred peeled back, and Clara saw not a villain, but a woman broken by grief, a sister who'd loved so fiercely that loss had curdled it into something cruel. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly, and meant it. "For your pain. For what you lost. I do understand." "You understand nothing," Mora hissed, but her voice cracked, and tears slid down her cheeks as she turned and disappeared into exile. Clara watched her go, heart heavy. Mora had tried to destroy her, had twice endangered the girls, but she'd also been a prisoner of her sorrow, warped by a love that had nowhere to land. "You're too kind," Sani said, stepping up beside her. "Maybe," Clara murmured. "Or maybe I just remember what it felt like. To be so lost, you'd do anything to feel something again. You made good choices. You stayed. You fought." Clara turned to look at him. "You made that choice for me. Gave me this necklace. Called me a mother before I even had the words to say yes." "Yes," Sani said, "because I saw the same emptiness in your eyes that I knew in mine. You didn't need choice. You needed purpose. You needed something to live for." He met her gaze, calm and sure. "Was I wrong?" Clara touched the turquoise necklace warm against her chest. She looked at Tala and Naya, who were chasing each other nearby, always glancing back to make sure she was still there. She felt the aching places in her body where she had bled twice for them. "No," she whispered. "You weren't wrong." "Then tomorrow," Sani said, "we begin again. Not bound by duty but by choice. You choose to be their Shima. They choose to love you. And He paused. "I choose to believe life can still be good." That night, Clara lay in the small home with her girls curled against her, and for the first time in 6 months, her dreams weren't haunted by Jed Flint. Instead, she dreamed of something new. A home that smelled of smoke and sage, little hands tucked into hers, laughter around a fire, a future, one where grief didn't vanish, but made room for joy, where endings carved the space for new beginnings, where saving 2 little girls from wolves had, somehow, saved her from drowning in her own sorrow. She had come to the mountains to disappear. Now she was becoming someone else entirely, stronger, steadier, whole. A mother? And maybe, just maybe, one day, a wife again. But that would be tomorrow's story. Tonight, she held her daughters close and felt something she had thought was gone for good. Peace. Purpose. Home. 6 months flowed by like water across stone, sometimes rough, sometimes gentle, but always forward. Clara's Apache had improved. Tala still giggled at her accent. Her hands bore new calluses, her skin bronzed by the sun. She'd learned to track game, read the clouds, cook over open flame until the flavors felt like belonging. But more than skills, she'd learned what it meant to be a mother, not in name, but in truth. She learned Tala had quiet nightmares and only needed arms around her, no words. That Naya loved stories and would sit for hours listening to tales from Clara's childhood. That they tested her over and over, pushing at the edges, needing to know if this new Shima would stay even when things got hard. And Clara stayed. Through tantrums and tears, through whispered cries for their real mother and the flood of apologies that always followed. She stayed. And slowly, they stopped testing. Trust grew in the cracks of grief. Love settled into something solid. Acceptance from the village came slower. Some welcomed her quickly. Others watched and waited for her to fail or run. A few never softened, certain she'd stolen a place that wasn't hers. But even the harshest doubters could not deny what was clear. The girls were thriving. "They laugh again," Suna said one day as they tanned hides together. "That is what matters. You give them something they needed. Not to replace Eha, but to carry them forward. You love them as they are now, not as memories." "I'm trying," Clara replied. "Some days I still feel like I'm pretending, like I'll wake up and none of this will be real." Suna chuckled. "All mothers feel this, even those who carried the child themselves. The secret?" She leaned in. "None of us know what we're doing. We just love and learn." Clara laughed, a sound that came easier now. Sani kept his distance. He honored the space he'd promised her. He slept with the warriors, stopped by each night to see the girls, taught Clara what she needed. But he never crossed the line. Still, the air between them shifted over time. Quiet, charged moments. His hand steadying her arm, her fingers brushing his when passing food. Eyes meeting over firelight and holding just a little too long. One evening, after the girls were asleep, Clara found him sitting outside, watching stars. She joined him without a word. "They asked about Eha today," Clara said softly. "Wanted to know if I thought she'd be angry they call me Shima." "What did you say?" "I told them love doesn't run out, that having me doesn't erase her, that Eha will always be their first mother, and I'm honored to be their second." Sani was quiet a long time. "That is a perfect answer," he said finally. "Better than any I have given. You understand what they need." "I understand loss," Clara replied, trying to move forward without letting go of what's behind. "I understand." She hesitated. Loving someone new while still loving someone gone. Not replacing, just making room. The silence between them filled with meaning. "Clara," Sani said, voice low and rough. 6 months ago I brought you here because it was right. Sacred duty. I did not expect—" He trailed off. "I did not expect to want. To see you not just as mother to my daughters, but as a woman, a partner, a future." Clara's heart thundered. "Sani." "I won't ask more than you want to give," he said. "You came here as their Shima. If that is all, then I will honor that." He looked at her now, eyes unguarded. "But if you want more, if you think you could want me, not out of duty, but out of choice, tell me." Clara thought of Jed, of the cold cabin, of the aching, slow death she'd barely escaped. She thought of these last months, of firelight and laughter and love. "I'm scared," she whispered, "of loving, of losing, of building something only to watch it fall." "I'm scared too," Sani said, "but I'm more afraid of never trying, of reaching the end and regretting that I ran from happiness when it was offered." "This?" Clara asked. This complicated, messy, impossible life? Yes. No hesitation. My daughters smile again. I wake with purpose. I look forward to each night. And you? He reached out slowly, giving her time, took her hand. You are the reason for all of it. Kate stared at their joined hands, his rough and scarred from a warrior's life, hers still bearing the mark from the wolf bite that started it all. Two broken souls, drawn together by blood and grit, bound not by fate, but by everything they'd been through. I'm not Lilia, she said, voice quiet. I know, Anu replied, softer than the dusk wind. I don't want Lilia. I want Kate, the woman who fights wolves with her bare hands, the woman who speaks our tongue though it twists hers, the one who'd bleed for my daughters without question. He looked her in the eye, solid as the earth beneath them. I want you, just as you are, not a shadow, not a memory. Kate swallowed. And if I say yes, if I say I want this, not out of duty but because I choose it, then what? A slow smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. Then we marry, the old way. You'll be my wife, and their mother, and we'll make a life, one not built on what came before, but on what we can build now. His thumb brushed gentle circles into her palm. You'll teach me that white women can be brave. I'll teach you that Apache men can be gentle. And together, we'll show our daughters that love ain't a thing you run out of. It just grows. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded once. I choose yes, she whispered. I choose you. I choose this life. Not because you asked it of me, but because it already became mine. Anu drew her close, arms wrapping around her like home. It was different than her first husband. Not better or worse, just something new. A kind of love born from survival and respect. Something steady, something earned. The fire, she figured, would come with time. We'll tell the girls tomorrow? Anu asked, his voice low against her hair. Kate let out a watery laugh. Ka asked last week why you don't sleep in our lodge anymore. I think she's been scheming. He chuckled. My daughter is too clever, like her Shima. So they sat, quiet under the stars. Two people rebuilt from broken pieces. Tomorrow there'd be a ceremony, maybe a feast. But tonight, they just held on to each other. And to the miracle of second chances. 2 years later, Catherine stood at the edge of the village, watching the sunset turn the mountains to gold and fire. Behind her came the sound of laughter. Ka and Tarni chasing after their baby brother, 10 months old and full of mischief, with dark eyes like his father and a stubborn jaw just like hers. Anu stepped beside her, slid an arm around her waist like it was second nature. What's on your mind? He asked. That I almost didn't come here, she said. That day you showed up at my cabin with that necklace. I nearly slammed the door. But you didn't. No, Kate smiled. Not that you gave me much room to. I gave you all the room, Anu said, gently correcting. I just laid the road plain. Come with me, build something new. Stay behind. Watch yourself rot. You're not exactly subtle. I never claimed to be, he chuckled. I claimed to be right. She leaned into him, looking over the village that had become home. Daughters who called her Shima like they meant it. A son she'd birthed with this stubborn man. A life she hadn't asked for, but somehow had been given anyway. Yes, she said. You were right. This pushy, proud warrior who made me a mother before I even knew I wanted to be one. He saved my life. We saved each other, Anu said firmly. You gave my girls a mother. I gave you a reason to wake up. Together we made something real. Ka came tearing up the path, breathless from running. Shima, come quick. Tarni says she can shoot farther than me, but I say no, you gotta judge. Anu smiled. We come, As they walked toward the clearing, where Tarni waited with her little bow, Kate thought about who she used to be. A widow alone, fading inside a cold mountain cabin. That woman felt like another lifetime. She'd saved 2 Apache girls from wolves. The next day, their father showed up with a necklace that felt more like a chain than a gift. Turned out, it was both. That chain had wrapped around her life, pulled her from the edge, and set her feet down in new soil. The reward she hadn't wanted had become everything she needed. Sometimes the best gifts show up in the worst disguise. Sometimes life hands you a burden that turns out to be a blessing. And if you're brave enough to say yes, to walk toward what scares you most, life just might hand you a whole new beginning. Kate had said yes, and life had answered.